Let's go adventuring while the world ends around us. Today, we're talking about Forbidden Psalm. Hey there, Philip here from Manning the Fort, and one of the more successful videos on the channel has been a brief overview of a lot of different solo games. There's a link to that down below if you happen to have not seen that yet, and I've been admittedly very slowly working my way through that catalog of games, all of which, or the vast majority of which, I own at this point. Most recently, the one that I played is Forbidden Psalm. I wanted to make sure I got to this one for a couple of reasons. One, I've talked to its creator, Will Rahman, last year and was really intrigued by it. I love the whole idea of ultra grimdark fantasy. Plus, the newest iteration of the game, Kill Sample Process, which takes things and puts them in a super grimdark cyberpunk setting, was on its way to me from the Kickstarter, so I wanted to make sure I got some plays in of the base game. So what is Forbidden Psalm? It's a rules-light skirmish game that, as I mentioned, is set in a super grimdark fantasy setting. It's based on the, I'm going to say Merkborg. I know that's not 100% correct, but it's easier for my American mouth to form. So it's based on a Merkborg, which is a highly dark fantasy setting about the end of the world. And this isn't like there's a prophecy that says that, oh, the world's going to end once X criteria are fulfilled, or, you know, when the stars align in this certain way. No, the world is ending actively around you right now. And that is the setting in which we play Merkborg and Forbidden Psalm. I'll put up a few pages from the rulebook so you can see how the aesthetic even bleeds into the way that the rulebook itself is put together. I've heard it described as very doom metal, and I think that's pretty apt. At the same time, though, much like its tabletop RPG counterpart, Merkborg, it doesn't take itself all that seriously. Yes, you fight the undead and corpse collectors and eldritch horrors from beyond the veil of reality, but you also fight sock-stealing goblins. Another feature of all of the Forbidden Psalm books is a random name generator that is almost guaranteed to make you laugh. The book itself gets right to the point, and I really like this, especially in indie games and smaller games. It gets right to the point of showing you how to make a warband. It's fairly unlikely that a game like Forbidden Psalm is going to be someone's first tabletop experience, so the whole, what is a tabletop role? A war game, what is this? It skips a lot of that and gets right into the meat and potatoes. Okay, this is how you get models on the table fighting bad guys. Or worse guys. Worse guys. There are no good guys. All of the members of your warband are going to have significant flaws that you roll for randomly. So you roll a d20, and no matter what you roll, well, I guess there is one exception where you ignore the flaw, but for the rest of them, it's going to be bad news. It's going to negatively impact the way that that character plays on the tabletop. But that's counterbalanced by a set of feats, which you also roll a d20 for randomly, and they give you a bit of a bonus as you play. Now, while they are bonuses, it's not necessarily for the reasons that you would expect. Like, enemies might have a harder time hitting you, but it's because you're so hideous they have a hard time looking at you. Another good example is the character can gain a special melee attack that drains health from an enemy because they're kind of low-key a vampire. Next, you spend money for gear for your warband. This covers a lot of the basics, weapons, armor, things like that, but there are some other things that should not be ignored here, and that's things like lanterns and torches, because let me tell you, when you roll for conditions before each battle, darkness is pretty brutal if you don't have a light source. There's also a phase in warband creation where you choose whether or not you want to have a spellcaster. Now, like in a lot of games, spellcasters can be disproportionately powerful, but in Forbidden Psalm, that comes with a potentially really heavy price tag. If you fumble on a spell roll, if you're lucky, the spellcaster dies. If you're not lucky, his friends go with him. That said, in general, it's a good idea not to get too attached to any of the characters in your warband. As for how it plays on the tabletop, it's very straightforward. You roll a d20 for a test, and the difficulty for almost every task is a DC of 12. So you need a modified result of 12 or higher in order to succeed. Now, as part of character creation, you assign a set of bonuses and penalties to your 4 key stats, and then that applies to this as well. So one very simple mechanic that you use, like I said, for just about everything in the game, so things can move along quickly without having to flip back and forth through the rulebook. The base book comes with a campaign of 10 scenarios, and now I have not played all of them, I've just played the first couple, but looking ahead a little bit, it's pretty clear that they get more and more difficult as things move forward. Also, there are a number of expansions available in both PDF and physical form. I happen to buy the physical copies of one of the expansions, Footsteps of the Mad Wizard, as well as the Last War, which is kind of a World War I-esque take on the whole Forbidden Psalm thing. But there's a lot of different scenarios. There's also fan content. If you happen to subscribe to Bestiaria Miniatures, there's scenarios that come out every month that are themed and paired with the miniatures that they put out. So for me, Forbidden Psalm has a lot going for it. I've always been kind of a fan of Grimdark. I've been a 40k player and a Warhammer Fantasy player. I won't say Age of Sigmar because I've never actually played a game of Age of Sigmar, but anyway, Grimdark kind of game player for a long time, and this really kind of takes that up to 11 without being too serious. Something else that's great for me is how solo friendly it is. Now, Will says when I interviewed him, oh, and by the way, that interview is also linked below. He went by Kevin back then. He goes by Will now, same person. Anyway, he said that the games, when he's designing them, when he's designing the scenarios and all these things, he's playing solo. And so they're built, you can play co-op, and you can play versus another player. I don't recommend that. The game is plenty deadly enough already. But it's really built from the ground up to support solo play. Also, the amount of space that it takes up is really convenient for someone like me. As I've pointed out before, you might be able to see the cantilevered ceiling here above me. I don't have a lot of space to play at home, and I don't always have the time or inclination to go somewhere else. Forbidden Psalm plays on a 2x2 board, which is really nice because it's very easy to set up on a kitchen table. Now, there are a few things that I think you can buy to kind of make the experience even more streamlined if you're so inclined. One for me is I'm a physical rulebook guy. I can't help it. But the PDFs are also, I think they come bookmarked when you buy them from Wargame Vault or through Weird Designs, Will's company. The other thing that's really nice, I mentioned 2x2 tables that you play on. So I bought a couple of these based on the recommendation of the Forbidden Psalm Facebook group. And these are made by Loke Battle Mats, and they are specifically the books of battle mats. So they come in pairs like this. This one is the dungeon. There's also like a wilderness one and a city one and a town one. But they fold out, and when you put both of them together, each of these pages is 1x1. So when you put 2 of them together, you end up with a 2x2 board, and if you don't want to, you can forego doing 3D terrain at all. So the game can travel really, really well. Also, it's miniatures agnostic, so any existing kind of fantasy miniatures that you've got, you're probably good to go. If you happen to own the models from Cursed City, I think those would actually make for a really good both warband and villains for Forbidden Psalm. So if you happen to have a copy of that, you're probably already set. I mentioned Bestiaria Miniatures. They make some really good stuff. Also, more recently, I backed a Frontiers, they call it. It's the crowdfunding alternative for my mini factory from a company called Flesh of Gods. And they specifically came out with a whole set of models for Merkborg. And I think the Frontier, as I'm recording this, it's very close to ending, but they'll still have those miniatures available for sale later on, and I'll have some pictures up now, and they are thematically super cool. They look the part perfectly because they're designed for the same universe. Now, if you found this video at all helpful, I'd really appreciate it if you gave it a like and subscribe to the channel. Like I said, I am working my way through various solo-friendly games that I've been playing and been meaning to play, and I will get to Kill Sample Process and The Last War, which, as I said, are kind of setting variations on the Forbidden Psalm rule set. Also, if you feel like directly supporting me, I do have a Patreon. It's linked down below. I think the lowest tier is about $2 American, and that helps me do things like buy hard copies and PDFs of rule sets and buy resin for the printer, that sort of thing. So you're directly helping me, but really likes are the currency of YouTube. Forbidden Psalm to me is a great example of the high quality that can be achieved even by very small, in this case, one-person studios. The book is really kind of a piece of art in and of itself. The illustrations are very stylized, but the quality of the product and the quality of the rule set are both really high, and that's the sort of thing that I really like to see within the space. If you want to see my review of another independent game developer that I think is doing a great job, my video about one-page rules should be on the screen right now. Until next time, Riprix has a job for you, and thanks for watching.